future. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey everybody, welcome. It is Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021. Welcome to the newest edition of the Raging Chickens family of podcasts. Yes, it's the Wednesday show with Cyril Mychalejko, progressive columnist for the Bucks County Courier-Times and the Intelligencer. The show joins Out the Coop Live, our Monday interview show, and our Friday Politics Roundup, in which Sean Kitchen and I break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And you should also make sure that you're signing up for Cyril's newsletter on Substack. That is cyrilmychalejko.substack.com, cyrilmychalejko.substack.com. Of course, there is a link in today's show notes. You can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month at patreon.com/rcpress. Your support helped make this show possible. Legit. How about that? And you can also help out the show by heading on over to our YouTube channel. Yes, and if you're not there already, right, watching this stream, watching this show, watching all our shows, well, if you're not there already, well, you're listening right now for the first time, make sure you head on over there, you smash that subscribe button, listen to the stream, and hit that notification bell so that you know every time that we go live. And we got a special show coming up this Monday on Out the Coop Live. I'm going to be away, but we've got a pre-record. We're not leaving you hanging out dry there. We've got Dana Morrison and Eleni Schirmer coming on to talk about college debt, university debt. And we're not just talking about student debt, but the debt that universities themselves have incurred, due to the lack of funding, lack of support, and all sorts of kind of weird bonding schemes. You can get that show on Monday night on Out the Coop Live. And make sure you join our Discord server to continue the conversation all week long. Just click on the link in today's show notes. Just find that out. You can join us up. And a special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. And check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page. And follow him on Twitter at @SongADayMan. That's with 2 N's, @SongADayMan on Twitter. And I got to say, it's a kind of a dark song, but a happy song at the same time, and it makes me feel good and bad at the same time. So there you go, right? It's ultimately, I think it's extraordinarily hopeful. So that's what I'm going for here. Cyril, man, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Great to be back.
Hey, well, here we are. It is another Wednesday in the kind of glorious world that we live in these days. And, we didn't talk about this ahead of the show, but, we're doing this in the wake of the Republicans tanking the new voting bill kind of last night, which just seems a little par for the course about kind of where we're at. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. Democracy is a threat, apparently.
Indeed, which has been, got to say, pretty much one of the main themes that you've been writing about since you started your column at the Bucks County Courier-Times. And speaking of your column, today we're going to be talking about the latest one you had on tap. Your latest column is called Conversion Therapy is a Barbaric Abuse of LGBTQ Youth, and It's Legal in PA. And you start off that piece by saying, look, I didn't even know this was illegal here, right? And I think that, you certainly weren't alone in that. So talk us through a little bit about kind of what brought you to that column and what you found out.
Sure. I was just reading, just covering the news, and there was just a news brief on one website about Brian Sims and Jessica Benham's legislation to kind of ban this. And when I saw it, I honestly could not believe it was still legal here, and I almost felt embarrassed, that I didn't know that. So that I thought it was really important for me to write about it and just to let other folks know that one might not know that that's still happening here in Pennsylvania,
right?
And two, that we actually do have representatives that are representing all of us, right? Brian Sims and Jessica Benham, who want to put a ban to this barbaric practice. And it's like something out of Clockwork Orange, right? It's pretty sadistic and twisted. They in the past they've used shock therapy nausea-inducing chemicals, orgasmic reconditioning, and on other mental and like physical forms of coercion, to try to change who people are, right? And it's just this part of this misguided, but that still a lot of people believe in, idea that being LGBTQ is like a mental disorder, right? And
it used to be, right? I mean, this was part of the American Psychological Association's guidelines for years, right? That it was officially listed as a disorder, and only recently has been removed, right?
Yeah.
And so, but that's its roots, right? That somehow this is a disorder that needs to be cured, as opposed to, like you said, like this is who people are.
Yeah, I mean, it shows like how far we still have to go with this civil rights struggle for the LGBTQ community.
100%.
And there's just like there's this like homophobic culture that's so pervasive, and Pennsylvania, I think, is just ground zero with that. One of the things I brought up, and which you shared a video with me that you had made from at the time, was just with Daryl Metcalf and his meltdown in 2018. He could not
beg, don't touch.
He could not, yes, beg, don't touch. He couldn't even let a male colleague just touch his arm because he wanted his attention for 1 second, and had to declare, that he was a heterosexual with a wife, right? And that this was.
And he loves his wife.
Yeah, who he loves, apparently. But it's just the part of the problem is it's that kind of behavior is like normalized, and it's not called out enough. We see it in school boards as well. So like in Northwestern PA, GoErie.com reported about Pencrest School District director posting on Facebook that a gay pride book display at a local school was quote unquote totally evil, right? And then locally, of course, we have like Ricky Chaikin, who I mentioned again, who's running for Penn School Board, just posting like a disgusting transphobic Facebook post, and it's appalling. It shows a poverty of intellect, just like a really just distorted moral compass, and the fact that, this needs to be rejected. Like, there's one thing like I'm trying to like wrap my head around, and like I see people, and sure, like we all live together. These are our neighbors. We want to be inclusive. We want to have conversations. But like, how do you have conversations with people like this? Like I'm, on the one hand, I can see like why you would want to try to build a bridge with the community because you don't want to be divided. But at the same time, it's just like, don't you have to kind of like reject this and just publicly say that this is not acceptable?
Yes, look, this is something that, there's a meme that I shared a while back, but I remember this. Karl Popper, for example, talks about this, about the limits of tolerance. Right, is that once you get to a certain point, you have to be intolerant of intolerance, right? As a precondition of civility and tolerance, right? That is not a direct quote by him, but that's exactly what it is. And there's this book by Alex Zamelin, which I have right here, which I've reached out to try to get him on kind of one of the show, Against Civility, the Hidden Racism and Our Obsession with Civility. And it makes a similar kind of point. This is something I've written about and talked about on the show before, is that idea is that if we're going to have that civil discourse that everybody seems to want so much, right, there has to be certain red lines, right? It's like once you have people that are seeking to destroy other people in our communities or treat them as less than human beings, then they don't get to punch their card to the civility party. Right? Nazis need to go. People who are trying to kind of like, abuse LGBTQ youth, right, through this kind of conversion therapy, or a range of other things. I've told the story about like when I was growing up, like with my high school, was with my girlfriend in the parking lot, like by the train station, where I had people, all of a sudden there's these two guys on a skateboard kind of skating around because like my girlfriend had short hair and they thought we were a couple of gay guys and they were there with clubs to beat us up. And it turns out I knew the guys. Jeez. Right? It's like, we're talking about that has to be like the red line of we have to be able to stand as a community and say, no, this is not tolerable. right? And it's not just their opinion. They don't just get to, say whatever they say, right? And this is like the limits of free speech too, as well. Just like you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, right? You can't seek to destroy fellow human beings and expect to be kind of an accepted member of the society.
No, absolutely. I mean, and then she, along with the other Republican candidates, were just on the radio program, The Conservative Voice, talking about their campaign. And again, they just like doubled down on this like disgusting bigotry, kind of comparing like people who are trans to someone who like identifies as an elephant, and they're like joking about it and laughing about it. Like, for me, like, how do you not bring this up in the campaign? Like this this kind of bigotry and extremism is like a social virus, but it's a virus where actually sunlight is the best disinfectant. And by that, I mean, you need to just kind of keep bringing this out in the public, for everyone to see, kind of lay it bare in the town square so that the community can come together and say, this is absolutely unacceptable and we need to reject this. And they should be people like Ricky Chaikin need to answer to these types of things. Like, okay, do you still believe in QAnon? Why? Or have you learned that was just some kind of, were you duped by it? Are you still bigoted and transphobic? Do you still think it's okay for a school board director who represents LGBTQ students and LGBTQ members of the community to make these kinds of remarks? I mean, it just seems to me like these are the things that like the Democrats on the other side need to be bringing up and need not to shy away from, because it's not divisive if we're bringing it up. They're the ones being divisive, and we're saying we need to stop with this divisiveness, right? And if you can't be accepting, right, you need to at least be not bigoted with your public actions and words.
Well, and maybe not in a position of power where you can enact policies that are going to actually hurt people.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I agree with you 100%. And, and this is the one of the problems. We've talked about this even on this show before, right? Where the reason why you have to call these things out early is because people who do not pay attention to politics on a regular basis, right, and are trying to make a decision, do their civic duty, and vote for school board candidates, what they see in these public pronouncements is everyone saying things very civilly, right? Everyone's saying, I'm here for all the kids who want to have high quality education, and there's no way to discern like who's who, right? And this is precisely why you need to make the contrast clear, especially when you've got people who hold such extreme views that would, look, I mean, they would not be allowed at my freaking Thanksgiving table, right? I mean, why the heck am I going to have them running on my school board? I mean, I agree with you, man. I agree with you. This has got to be, and it's been frustrating for me to see, again, this tactic that we see in a lot of, I see a lot of Democrats, right? And I think it comes from a good space, right, of people wanting people to be part of a community and not wanting to have that kind of tension all the time. But I think that from my perspective, we've been at this point for a while, right? But here we are. We need to be at a point where we're saying, look, we have to stop it. Right? Just like we had to kind of stop the virus and the pandemic, right? We have to stop this. And you don't do that by passively hoping it's going to go away. And you don't do it by pretending that the most extreme views don't. It has to be brought out into the public and light has to hit it.
Yeah. And what happens when you don't do that is that it just becomes, that kind of behavior becomes normalized and it grows, right? And that's what, that's one of the reasons why, the Republican Party in Bucks County, especially the grassroots, is so extremist, right? And the local newspapers need to do a better job of it too. The ones I write for. Like if you're going to be quoting someone like Andy Meehan, who is right. The head of the voter education and outreach, right, for Bucks, like you need to provide some context about who he is and what he believes in. Right. So you can say that he is a QAnon follower, or when he announced his candidacy, he publicly declared himself QAnon, so that readers know that this is the person who's offering this type of analysis or whatever it is that he's kind of like spewing in the public square.
Yeah, I agree, and it should be just a policy. Like this is what I think. I think it was WITF out in Harrisburg, right? The NPR affiliate out there, who basically, they passed a policy that anytime that they're going to be referring to these state representatives who either encouraged the insurrection on July 6th or took part in it or are doing all this kind of denial of, Biden's kind of victory and thing, that they're going to have a disclaimer in every story saying these are who these people were if they're going to quote them. And I think that this is what we need to see in local reporting too as well. It's a great point. And one thing I want to say then too, you interview some folks kind of in the piece too, and I think it was Marlene Prey, which I think you talk about in Doylestown, who's actually doing, has been, I mean, this is not new. She's been doing work there for a long time where, I think it's important to point this out as a resource too, as we kind of want to push back against this, conversion therapy and actually the kind of resources where people have been kind of combating this for a while.
No, I mean, Marlene is amazing. So is the Rainbow Room. Which is a space for LGBTQ youth and allies. And so like what they're kind of creating is a community where, these teens and young adults can kind of like feel safe and feel comfortable with like who they are. And, also like, Leon just talking to me, who's like a Penn-Ridge graduate, he's just an amazing individual. And I'm glad that, they took the time to talk with me and, that they had the courage to do that because it's not an easy thing to do, especially in the political climate that you see in, the Penn-Ridge School District as well as like throughout Bucks County.
100%. Well, listen, I encourage everybody to check out Cyril's latest piece, Conversion Therapy is a Barbaric Abuse of LGBTQ Youth, and It's Legal in PA. And make sure that you're following. I mean, he talks about this in the piece. State Representatives Brian Sims and Jessica Benham, they have they're co-sponsoring legislation. It's House Bill 729, and that will ban this kind of, and I'll quote you on this one, Cyril, because you couldn't say it better, to ban this medical quackery based on the disproven premise that being LGBTQ is some kind of disease or disorder, and therefore through therapy a person can be cured. That's what this legislation is an attempt to kind of say. This will be declared illegal in the state of Pennsylvania. So do check out that piece. And look, and I think that the fact that it's Pride Month right now, I think it's while people are actually paying attention to some of these issues, right? More so than say at other points. I think it's important they're putting forward. Matter of fact, I should also say Jessica Benham was also on Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast recently, talking about some of this legislation too as well. So definitely everybody make sure you follow what Brian Sims and Jessica Benham are doing. That's House Bill 729. So Cyril, I also wanted to make sure we had some time to talk a little bit about your this week's newsletter, kind of like. And I guess I wish we get to the happy news here, but this is why I'll make another plug. Everyone, you need to get out there and subscribe to his newsletter on Substack, because in addition to kind of columns and some of the stuff and some of the highlights of progressives around the state, he does, I don't know what you'd call it, like a kind of news roundup commentary for the week, which I find increasingly valuable. So take us into a little bit of some of the stuff that you were highlighting this week. Particularly, maybe we could start with Oregon.
Sure. So, there was a recent poll in Oregon that showed that white supremacy is gaining popularity throughout the state, right? Which is a really scary proposition. And obviously, like, Oregon is not, some kind of outlier. I think, like, what we see in Oregon, it kind of just tells the story of what's happening across the United States, right? And this goes back to what we were just saying, is because, like, this type of rhetoric and these ideas become normalized and people aren't called out on it enough. And so according to the poll, 40% of those polled say that America needs to protect and preserve its white European heritage, right? Which is just the language of, what we see from like white nationalists and white supremacists. 39% believe that whites are discriminated for the color of their skin. And that's a big problem. And then support for white nationalists is at 11% in the state. So, a little over 1 in 10 people support white nationalism. Personally, I would like to see a similar poll done in Pennsylvania, because I think it would be fascinating what kind of results we would get. I would think it would be similar, if not a little more. And, maybe, I don't know who could do it, one of the progressive organizations, but I think that would be like a useful tool, for not just progressives, but just kind of like level-headed citizens, to know whether or not, how big of a threat that kind of ideology is, throughout the state.
Well, it's interesting. It's funny you should bring that up. I was looking online to see if I could find a poll in Pennsylvania that was asking these same kind of questions. And the closest I could come, I'm not saying that it hasn't been done or people aren't working on it, the closest I could come and kind of looking for it was a poll that was it was conducted back in 2020, and this is in the wake of the George Floyd murders. And what was interesting about this poll is it was looking at kind of the other end of the script, right, about people's kind of, thinking that racism is a problem and so on. And there were statistics in here that were like, 38%, 38% of the people believe strongly agree with the statement, white people in the U.S. have a certain advantages because of the color of their skin. They saw an increase in support of say Black Lives Matter and kind of wanting to address racism. But the thing is, it didn't ask the questions on the other side. Right. So we got to see these percentages, 38%, 27% in support of what Black Lives Matter are doing and that kind of thing. But the question was not asked, at least in this poll, about how many people see it as a problem, right, that we have to preserve our white heritage. Right. And I agree with you. I would love to see what that poll looks like here in Pennsylvania, and what those expressions look like, because there was a lot of polling that was coming out after that, and there was a bit of a celebratory coverage of it, saying that attitudes are changing, and I believe they are on the whole. Right, the attitudes are changing. Right, where we see that especially the younger generation is stepping up and wanting to kind of put an end to systemic racism. But as we know, with change comes the pushback as well. Also, you get the rise of kind of the militia organizations and like what we see happening here in Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, and then which leads to like another story that I kind of highlighted, which was based on reporting from the Center for Media and Democracy and Southern Poverty Law Center, I believe, worked together on this, which showed that, you were talking about that pushback. Well, that pushback's come in the form of $4.3 million that was donated in 2019 to VDARE, right, by a funding organization with ties to the Koch brothers and the Mercer family. VDARE is a white nationalist, just white nationalist, anti-immigrant group, right? $4.9 million getting funneled into that group. And then we wonder, why are things like this spreading, right? And then, this is, the conservatives need to have like a come to Jesus moment, right? Because if they're either going to be like, a white nationalist party, right, or whatever, fiscally conservative, free marketeers of the past. And VDARE also has like a local connection to Bucks County, right? So like one of the things I've argued, is that like this extremism that we're seeing in the Bucks GOP, like this isn't just a result of Trump, right? Like Trump obviously gave it quite a bit of oxygen, right? And his presidency kind of normalized things that maybe people would say behind closed doors. But behind closed doors back in 2011 is that VDARE founder, Peter Brimlow, spoke to the Thomas Jefferson Club, which is this like Republican club that would meet in Newtown, right? And there is just like a perfect example. And this was like during the time of the Tea Party, which, on theory was supposed to be anti-tax, but if we're going to be really honest, it was kind of like a racist backlash to,
Absolutely.
President Obama. And so, this is why, like, I think that you need to have like an extremism beat, right, with the local papers. Like, they need to like assign a reporter just to cover what's going on, because there's a lot going on and there's a lot that we don't even know about.
Right. And you see, and like when you look at that kind of money, right, that kind of money that's involved in it, this is not just like random everyday people kind of gathering together and say, what can we do? This is actually being stoked, right? This is like, that those millions of dollars are essentially, the gasoline hose that is kind of deciding where to point its, product, right, to keep those flames burning. And just so we're kind of want to put a finer point on it, VDARE, if you look on their website, right, is a perfect example. Now, Southern Poverty Law Center is an organization that kind of tracks hate groups, right, and they kind of support folks, and there's a long history of that. But so this is what it says on VDARE's website. There's a quote, and it says, this is from the head of Southern Poverty Law Center. Quote, VDARE stands out for its organizational prowess and links to power. And they call him the SPLC thug, Michael Edison Hayden. And it says, Southern Poverty Law Center thug Michael Edison Hayden wrote, just what I wrote, and it says, good, let's keep scaring them. We're building a fortress, visible and invisible. Please donate now and fuel SPLC's paranoia, right? That gives you a sense of their ethos. I mean, these are essentially taking like internet trolling with millions of dollars and funding it into local extremist organizations, right, to help stoke that in the real world. I mean, it's a pretty dangerous place.
Yeah, I mean, and that money goes to like journals, right? And journals where they kind of like, create this veneer of legitimacy, and they kind of like cloak their, racism and extremism and kind of like academic language, right? So that there's just like one part of it, right? And then there's just like more of the grassroots, organizing on the right, right? Organizing on the far right, that money's funding. And there's just like there's publishing houses, the books that they're creating. I mean, there's even like a white nationalist publishing house in Quakertown, right? That publishes Nazi literature. Antelope Hill Publishing, literally everywhere, right? This is what we're contending with, and especially like on the progressive side, like we're contending with this with like no money, right? Or there's not that same kind of like financial capacity to kind of like fight against this extremism, which kind of makes it, so important why grassroots organizing has to kind of like flower and flourish and grow, both locally, statewide and nationally.
Absolutely. Well, and this is one of the things that, I love about what you're doing with your newsletter, especially too, as well. I mean, we're focused here on some issues that need to be brought up. I 100% would back, having someone who would be on the hate beat or extremism beat in the local newspapers. But it doesn't mean that, all the stuff is happening kind of without any pushback. And one of the things that you've been doing in this newsletter is what the Media Progressive column or kind of entries, by interviewing people who are doing this work, right? Who are very also not being covered right, in a lot of local newspapers about the absolutely essential and kind of critical work they're doing. And this week you had a discussion, interview with Bonnie Chang. Can you tell us a little about what the work that Bonnie's doing?
Sure. Bonnie's great, super cool. She co-founded Bucks Voices with which is a voter engagement group, and one of their recent campaigns was increasing voter mail-in ballot drop boxes, right? So they had this just like really like just joyful kind of like march and musical parade in Doylestown that actually was like picked up, I think, by Rachel Maddow. Rachel Maddow like retweeted,
yes,
Chris O'Leary's kind of like tweet and video about that. In the last election, like 42% of Bucks County voters did mail-in ballots, right? And what the drop boxes, provide for voters is the kind of like security that things won't get lost or delayed in the mail, right? Which is really important. A few votes could tip an election, as we've seen. And right now there's only 3 drop boxes in Bucks County, right? It's just, that's ridiculous, right? So what they're trying to do is just kind of, give people greater access, right? Just make democracy work more efficiently and make it easier for folks. You know, and then, like you said, like one of the things, like I'm trying to build like community with the newsletter, and that's why I'm trying to like interview folks like once a week. Now, you know, primarily I'm focusing locally, but you know, I'll also like sprinkle in some national and international activists as well. You know, just so we can kind of like learn about what everyone's working on. And you know, how to get involved and get engaged if it's something that kind of like moves you or that you care about. So, but yeah, I mean, there's just so many amazing people that are doing work locally. You know, Kevin 11 from Bucks Anti-Racism Coalition, and I actually think he kind of traveled up to the last Penridge school board meeting to kind of like comment on critical race theory. But the work there that he's doing, the anti-racism organizing, you can just, you know, every week, you know, I'll be highlighting someone else, and you know, in the archives, you can kind of like see and just find out like who your neighbors are locally in Bucks County that are doing the progressive work. You know, maybe you just reach out and thank them, right? Or you say, hey, how can I help? What can I do to get involved and to give you a hand?
100%, and I think that's so valuable. And you know, there's this book that I teach in one of my classes. It's called Smoking Typewriters, and it's looking at the history of alternative press and radical press even through this, and makes a point about social movements. Is that, you know, one of the first things that when people are doing or trying to organize is to having to find each other. Right. And one of the first things that, you know, he's talking specifically in this book about, you know, the 1960s, but then making connections to our current day and saying that, you know, that's one of the first things that a lot of folks would do when they're just getting started out and is to start like a newspaper or a publication, right, as a way of kind of bringing community together. And this seems to be like, you know, another one of those examples because, you know, my experience has been, you know, all throughout my life is that everywhere I've gone, people would tell me things like, you know, I was in Southwest Ohio for my PhD program. And everyone said, oh, this is like, you know, super conservative area, blah, blah, blah. They told me this about when I moved to Kutztown University, same kind of stuff. And I just never accepted like anything is just a block like that. There's always people that are doing great work. The challenge is always about how to find them. And I'll tell you, you know, this your Substack newsletter is quickly becoming one of these places that I think that community can gather around. So please, everybody, you know, do check that out because it's really critical.
Thanks.
Oh, cool. Two quick kind of say like announcements and kind of housekeeping stuff here. One, this just came up in my feeds today, and I want to make sure to give it out a plug. Since we had Kadita Kenner this past week, we had her. She's from the New Pennsylvania Project. We had a fantastic interview with her last Wednesday. The New Pennsylvania Project, if you don't know what they are, you need to get on that ASAP because they are literally the wall that will stand against voter suppression, right? And that is their purpose. And Kadita Kenner is amazing. Well, they're having kind of, I guess it's like a fundraiser support stuff in Bucks County. It will be tonight, Wednesday, June 23rd from 6 to 8 p.m. The speakers are going to include State Senator Art Haywood, Marlene Katz, she's the board chair of the New Pennsylvania Project, and Kadita Kenner. So like I said, executive director of the New Pennsylvania Project. They'll be at the house farm of Brent Alderfer, and that's called Spring Creek Farm. If you want the address, you're interested in going. It starts out of student activist role at $33, guest of $100, friend $250, and it goes up from there. It's an opportunity to help fund the New Pennsylvania Project and kind of meet some other folks. I'll put a link in the show notes to that. But if you want to go there right now, you can go to secure.actblue.com/donate/NPP-bucks. That's secure.actblue.com/donate/NPP-bucks. But there will be a link in the show notes for today too as well if you want to kind of check that out. The last other thing I want to say is that I'm going to be giving up the steering wheel here for a couple weeks. My family and I are gonna get away for a little bit. It's the first opportunity in a long time we've had a chance to kind of just get away, and so we're going to take that time, do a little recharge, a little bit reward for the kids too as well for getting through this freaking insane year. But Cyril, will be taken over. As a matter of fact, after our record today, we're going to go and kind of run through stuff on kind of recording and things like this. I'm going to hand over the reins, and this is part of what Cyril and I have talked about too from the beginning of this show, is like looking for ways of kind of expanding it out, right? So expanding it so Cyril could take this in directions that are kind of like, hey, some interview comes up, yeah, we have our Wednesday show. Maybe a Wednesday show is going to be some interview with local activists. Maybe there'll be an additional special show that'll come on, right? But it's an opportunity to use this space to help kind of support the connection of the community that's here. So, Cyril, I'm thrilled to be able to hand over the reins to you for the next couple of weeks.
Well, thanks, Kevin. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've definitely learned a lot just from kind of being on here with you, this last month or so. So I appreciate it, and hopefully everyone else will as well.
Indeed. So be kind to him, everybody. Help him along, right? Make sure that was pretty good. It's going to rock. So, well, Cyril, I'm sure we'll be in touch while we're away, kind of off and on. But I'll see you kind of in person back in a couple of weeks. And for everybody else, please make sure before you leave today, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you kind of subscribe to the channel. Make sure you kind of like this stream, and make sure you hit that little notification bell so that you know every time new content is posted. And don't forget to tune in. We've got 2 special shows in Out to Coop Live while I'm away that are pre-recorded and uploading. This Monday will be Dana Morrison and Eleni Shermer. I'm sorry. They'll be talking about university debt and the fight back. And on the that's the 28th, and I guess it's the first week of July 5th, right after Independence Day. The special show I've got is going to be the first interview that I ever did, that we ever did as part of Raging Chicken. And it's I brought this back once before, but it's with the one, the only Noam Chomsky. So it was before we had really decent equipment, and it was in a very echoey building. The video is up on our YouTube page that you can search for it. But I've been playing around with the audio. I'm going to repackage that, and we're going to re-release that on July 5th so that you'll have some extra content for there. So there you have it. So Cyril, man, have a good one. And I think that on the flip side, I think that you and I are going to be getting together for a beer too as well, which is going to be great.
Sounds good.
All right. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Thank you all for tuning in. And, check out all our great shows and make sure that you're tuning in while I'm away. Cats away, like they say. Cats away. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Guess I'll fly